good? Alright. My speech is on increasing the minimum wage, by which I mean the minimum amount that a company legally must pay its workers for the work that they do. Because in recent years there's been a lot of talk about increasing the minimum wage. Most recently, it got passed to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And for a noble cause, the goal in mind is to have a positive effect on the working class citizens. Hopefully, they might take more money home at the end of the day for the work that they do. But I am here to tell you that it will actually have a negative result on working class citizens because it'll increase the cost of basic items. So all the extra money they make, they'll just wind up spending. It will wind up shutting down a lot of small businesses and will generally increase unemployment. So to go with my first point, I'm sure many of us have taken an economics class in here. We know that a business, if the cost of running the business increases, it eats into their profit margins and they have to charge more for their whatever good or service they provide in order to compensate. So any worker that works at these businesses and is making more money to presumably go out and spend will have to spend that much more. And this winds up hurting the companies, or this winds up hurting the workers that have been doing good, that maybe got a raise or two and say we're already making $15 an hour. Now all of a sudden everyone's making $15 an hour and it makes it that much harder for people to bridge any sort of gap. For reason number two, raising the minimum wage makes it next to impossible for many small businesses to function. As we mentioned, higher cost of items, people tend to buy less things. There is, as we learn in economics, there's a gap, there's a hit that these companies take, where the larger companies can afford to take that hit. The Walmarts of the world, the McDonald's, they can afford to absorb that cost. Whereas I personally know of a raw sushi in San Francisco where the minimum wage has been recently hiked up. They were always turning fair sales, nothing to write home about, but they were always making something decent, and then all of a sudden the cost just got too high to function and it wasn't worth keeping open anymore, so they had to shut the place down. All of the employees got laid off. Very few got to transfer to other restaurants. And the local economy lost that piece of business. And that's a big deal because according to the last US Census, small businesses account for 48% of the business in the US, so a very large portion of the economy. If we start chipping away at that and only letting the big businesses come in, not only does that raise the barrier of entry to entrepreneurship, but we're losing that much of the economy. Which brings us to our third point, that raising the minimum wage will increase unemployment. So in an economic study done by the models at the Economic Institute of Chile, they were projected increasing the minimum wage, at the time it was $10, and that wound up increasing unemployment by 2.8% for younger workers. This was later confirmed at an economic study done by UC Santa Cruz, the economics department there. When the minimum wage in 2007 to 2009 was increased, it actually increased unemployment with it. With that, many employees will wind up working less hours to compensate, increasing the workload on the employees that already are there, and resulting in a net loss of wages overall. And raising the minimum wage, making companies pay that much more for the same work, furthers the motivation to automate unskilled labor. So that if a company has to pay more for one worker, it becomes that much more attractive to replace them with a computer. Already, since the wage hike, McDonald's is reportedly adding 2,500 electronic kiosks. Wendy's is adding 1,000. Walmart is looking into several options. This is all from a report from Forbes. So it just becomes that much more attractive for a business to replace an employee that they now don't have to pay a wage, they now don't have to pay health insurance or anything like that, they just have to upkeep the computer. So, to sum up, raising the minimum wage will increase the cost of basic items, will make it next to impossible for many small businesses to function and hurt the economy that way, and will increase overall unemployment, especially for younger people. And because of all these things, raising the minimum wage will ultimately have a negative impact on working class citizens.
All right, Jack, the proposition is pretty clearly stated. The attention device, start with the proposals to increase the minimum wage, talk about states that are moving toward it, give us some background on that. We didn't really spend a lot of time talking about this in the public crash course in public speaking, but if you were in my public speaking class, I'd yell at you for starting off with "my speech today is on."
That's what you told us to do it the one time.
No. That's not what I told you to do. And in fact, I could look at video and show you that that's not what I told you to do. You do want to tell us what your claim is in the beginning of the speech, but you want to introduce the subject first. Then you want to tell us what your claim is. All right? So don't tell us that you're giving a speech. We know that. Just start with the other stuff. It wasn't a big deal. Like I said, it's not something that I said, this is not the public speaking class. I'm just giving you a hint. You don't have to be defensive about it. All right. Like I said, I did think that the proposition was clearly identified at the beginning of the speech, and that I do appreciate. There's also a good preview of what the supporting structure is for the most part, although sometimes the phrasing of those points needs to be a little bit clearer. It's interesting that the employment issue is the last one that you talk about. The first one that you talk about seems to be addressing other consequences to the whole society as a result of increased prices. I also thought there was an issue concerning the fact that these are working class people, lower income people, and that they're the ones who are going to be hurt the most. I didn't really hear much information on that, although it seemed like that was part of what you were setting up at the beginning of the speech. You signposted the points when you got to them in the body of the speech. I thought that was fine. Your first point has no evidence on it. It's just kind of like giving us a boilerplate summary of something that you might have learned in an econ class, but it's not even clear which element of the econ class you're talking about there. So it's a presupposition that these things are going to happen. I had no examples, no statistics, no authority that gets cited to even suggest these things. So I thought that the first point was really underdeveloped. Now you did a little bit better job on the second part where you're talking about businesses being potentially in trouble. You have a statistic talking about the percentage of business in the country that is a result of small businesses, and I thought that was fine. There's not much information, though, about what the profitability of those small businesses are or how close they are to struggling. It seems like there should be some information about that, and that's one of those places where there's a assumption, a presupposition that these sorts of things are going on, and that's something that needs some information on it. The example that you present on unemployment, the data that you give us is from Chile, and that seemed to, I'm not saying that that's not a reasonable comparison to make. You could certainly make that comparison, but it's a little strange given that we're talking about the U.S. and these proposals have been around for a number of years, that you're not citing any information that has been gathered talking about what the estimated impact would be in the United States. And unfortunately, I live in the real world where I've encountered information before and have heard this information extensively in the last few years. So it just feels like there's a void there, that you've got a minimal piece of information. The best part about it is that you did have this one university that suggests this is in fact true, and they've confirmed this was a direct relationship of the increase in the minimum wage in that location. So I thought that was a good link to have. It just seems like there's some more information that's available there that you're just missing out on. The argument about the movement toward automated replacement workers, that kind of thing. I thought you had some good examples here. McDonald's and Burger King and, Walmart thinking about what it is they're going to do about those things. Linking it to the minimum wage could be a little bit stronger. The fact that McDonald's ordered 2,500 of these kiosks, did they order them in California where the minimum wage is going up? That's what was not quite clear to me. So if you've got good information that links it to the minimum wage, you want to make sure to highlight that. And then you did the thing that I did tell you to do, which was summarize your argument at the end and finish with the claim. All right. Thank you.